With this session, I hope we can start to reframe and envision a future where water and food systems thrive harmoniously, cultivating sustainability, equity, and resilience for future generations. Like I mentioned, we're doing something a little different here today. This session will be kind of a departure from the usual types of presentations and talks that I and my organization tends to give. Because as our world and our climate is changing, so are the ways that we talk about and approach these issues, especially water and food. So I'm here learning something new about my work right alongside you. Just to reorient ourselves as a quick agenda, we're gonna spend probably like 10 minutes. I'm gonna try my hardest to illustrate the issues, all the wonky policy and politics that have to do with water issues, and then gonna quickly shift gears and reset and reframe how we think about these things, and then we'll move into a panel discussion with some lovely experts here today, and then we'll have time at the end for a little Q&A and a quick closing. So like I mentioned, I'm not going to be giving my usual talk about the state of water today in San Diego. I will be spending a little bit of time, like I mentioned, 10 minutes. You can time me, but don't time me. But some of these concepts and issues you all will be somewhat familiar with, and some of them will be a little new. But it's just to get us on the same page and level set. And then we'll shift into sort of a reframing approach with that panel discussion and time for questions, like I mentioned. So why are we here today? In this moment, right now. We're all connected by water. I mean, I'm assuming that's why you all are here today in this room. Water is fundamental to all life on Earth. I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time with facts and figures and science and policy in my work. But as a storyteller, I honestly think that stuff is really boring. It's not what moves me and what moves people to action. For me, it's about emotion and connection. So to start this shift within the broader narrative of our discourse, how we talk about these things, I'm reflecting on the way we see and speak about our interconnectedness, our kinship. So much of my work and our work as a collective, I was just talking about this with Maria this morning, can often focus on having a lack of something or not having enough of something, right? Not having enough money or resources or bandwidth, water scarcity, affordability. I hope that today's discussion we can start to integrate a view of abundance, connectedness, and even spirituality, or a sense of the sacred when we approach these topics. So to set the stage, I want to lay down the foundation for the work I do at my organization, San Diego Coastkeeper, just so we're all on the same page again. We believe in the fundamental right to safe, clean, and affordable water. I think you all can get on board with that. I don't know, if you don't, then you're probably in the wrong room. Because water is life, right? And we all deserve to benefit from policies that prioritize water and climate resilience in the face of floods, droughts, and other climate risks. However, there are a number of issues affecting our access to safe, clean, and affordable water, especially in San Diego. And our work at Coastkeeper focuses on water supply and water pollution issues. So that means where our water comes from, how it gets here, how it travels here, how much it costs, who's giving it or selling it to us, and where it goes, you know, what happens after you flush it down the toilet or it goes down the sink. And remember, I'm only spending like a little bit of time on this. So I really hope it doesn't like dampen the mood. But I just wanted to introduce these issues to you all. And then I'll share resources at the end of this section and at the end of my presentation, just so you can dive a little bit deeper and spend more time learning about these issues. So just stay with me. So in San Diego, there are 4 core threats to clean, safe, and affordable water. They're pollution, aging infrastructure, climate change, and lack of funding. I'll start with pollution. So I'm actually starting with a geographic term, watersheds. If you don't know what that is, the definition is up there. We have 11 coastal watersheds in San Diego County, and they all drain to the Pacific Ocean. If you think about the mountains, the canyons, the valleys, they act as a funnel. So when rain falls or snow falls, they flow through those systems and end up at the lowest point in an area. If you think about a bathtub, the shower head would be that rain or that snow, hits the sides of your shower curtain, or the tub, ends up in the drain. That would be the Pacific Ocean. So watersheds and geography sometimes present some issues for us in cities and urban environments. We have to deal with something called stormwater. Stormwater is the water management term for name for water that falls over an urban area as a result of snow or rain or even over irrigation. So when we overwater our landscapes, that water flows over our streets and ends up in our storm drains. When water flows over our streets and our parking lots and our yards, it picks up pollutants like bacteria, pesticides, heavy metals, trash, ends up in our storm drains, and those storm drains are not connected to our sewer system, so the stuff that goes down our toilets and our sinks, but they do drain directly to stormwater outfalls. And those are on our beaches, those are on our bays, they're on our streets, and they end up ultimately in the ocean. In San Diego, like I mentioned, the water that flows through our storm drains is separate from the water that gets flushed down our toilets and sinks and into sewers. So sewage water is understandably treated, right, for health purposes, while stormwater is not. Hopefully you're still with me. Stormwater, sewage system, separate. As stormwater flows across those hard city surfaces I mentioned, it picks up pollutants and it becomes polluted urban runoff, which is one of the largest threats to water quality or water health here in San Diego. Everything that ends up on our streets gets picked up during heavy rains or over irrigation and ends up on our beautiful beaches and in our ocean. So lots of pictures of trash. That's like in San Diego Bay, along creeks, in our canyons. And this pollution can have a huge impact on our local seafood. Guides like these can be seen throughout our county on our fishing piers. This graphic advises people to limit certain types of fish that they eat and catch because of something called bioaccumulation. So it's the buildup of toxins and pollutions in the flesh of certain sea life. And it also impacts public health. So here in Southern California, we have something called the 72-hour rule, where basically after it rains, you're supposed to wait 3 days, at least 3 days. I try to wait, I probably wait like longer, just because I know that there's like lots of pollution in the water. So you should wait at least 3 days before going into the coastal waters because of that polluted urban runoff. It can cause a lot of sicknesses, illnesses, GI infections, that sort of stuff. So when I see people like surfing in the rain, I believe they're fully aware of what they're doing, but I would not advise it. Yeah. Second, aging infrastructure. I talked about our stormwater system. It's over 100 years old. It's overburdened, underfunded, and in a state of literal disrepair. These are just examples of aging infrastructure. So that looks like flooding, sinkholes, pipe bursts, massive safety concerns, inconveniences to our, commutes. Earlier this year, there was a huge sinkhole. I live here in Escondido, so there was a huge sinkhole off the 78 West Freeway, and that was a stormwater infrastructure issue. That took like months to fix. I don't know if it's fixed, but we can drive on the freeway now. These are more pictures of flooding. On the left and right, that's actually in the Choyas Creek, Southeast San Diego area. That's like where people live. Like whenever it rains, they have to get sandbags and they literally can't use parts of their house. On the right, it's Mission Valley. You all probably know not to go to Mission Valley when it rains because there's lots of flooding. There are ways to get the water out, but those systems are also overburdened and we just kind of developed in the wrong area. Even in parts of the county like Poway, when it rains, there are boil advisories. So people have to literally boil the water that comes out of their tap because the infrastructure is so old that the sewage and stormwater systems are like getting cross-contaminated. So it's not just happening like, you know, in other places, it's happening here in San Diego. Third issue, climate change. Can't forget about climate change. San Diego imports over 90%, or almost 90% of our water supply from really far away places, thousands of miles away. It's also really expensive to get here. And some of those areas are in worse droughts than we are. And the state of California uses basically 20%, almost 20% of our resources on electricity transporting and cleaning that water. So moving those waters into our buildings, our businesses, our houses. That's almost a fifth of our state budget just on water. So water, energy, food, climate, it's all connected, right? We're all connected by water. On the flip side of droughts and dryness, we can expect heavier, more erratic rainy seasons, just like the one that we saw at the beginning of this year, end of last year, and what we might see at the end of this year, right, with El Nino. They said it's supposed to be even wetter, which I can't really fathom in my brain right now. And the sea levels are rising, so there's a lot of really heavy issues going on, right? I don't even have time to get into environmental justice and equity issues, which are exacerbated by climate change and poor planning and policy. And last but not least, there's funding, or lack of it, right? These issues are only going to keep getting worse and more expensive. These images are actually a couple years old, so the city of San Diego actually has a funding shortfall, so we're lacking almost $3 billion to fix our stormwater system. In this bottom graphic, you see stormwater is that blue. Everything else is in the colors, right? So our streets, our roads, our parks, stormwater outweighs all of those things. So what can we do about it? I'm not going to answer that right now because I mentioned I only have 10 minutes. But I do promise that there are solutions being proposed and discussed and hopefully being put into place. So don't be discouraged. I promised you resources. If you want to learn more about what is being done today, what organizations are working on these issues, these are resources. There's a wonderful link to a beautiful story map that I made that contextualizes a lot of these issues that I introduced and talks about some of the policy solutions and the future of water in San Diego. I'll display this at the end if you don't have time to take a picture too. Or you can pick up or read digitally the issue that we collaborated with Edible San Diego magazine on earlier this year. There are 3 or 4 articles in there about stormwater pollution, how it affects our local seafood. You can learn about marine protected areas and local habitat conservation efforts. And you can check out more resources for learning about how water, food, and energy are connected. Okay, I think that was 10 minutes, right? Can we take a breath? Because I'm gonna switch gears and I need to take a breath. So if you could breathe in. Okay. So now I'm going to reset the stage. Remember, we're here to reframe how we approach water and food systems from that scarcity mindset, right? So all those issues that we talked about that are really scary and overwhelming, and try to explore these issues from a view of abundance and connectedness, even spirituality or a sense of sacredness. So everything on this planet has energy, right? A life force that connects us all as kin. Personally, never do I feel more connected and in tune with the sacred and spiritual than when I'm surrounded by life, like we are today in community with each other, or among non-human kin, or as we like to say, in nature, right? As our world and our attention and our work and our communities become even more fractured, it can be so easy to focus on the differences and what sets us apart from one another. But in a world where change is constant and seemingly increasing, as with the climate and water and conflict, we must learn to navigate and change together. Or we must learn to navigate this change together by leaning into and acknowledging our kinship, our shared relations, our histories. Because in reality, we're more alike than we are different, right? We all need clean water, clean air, food, shelter, love. So for the next hour, I invite you to just tap into that quiet, resilient, and sacred part of yourself that seeks connection, to better understand yourself and others. I'm here to invite you to think about water and by extension food and land as cultural and spiritual resources. And I hesitate to use that term resource. They mentioned it this morning because as I'm learning and changing from our Indigenous brothers and sisters and our elders who have always seen life on this planet as sacred and kin, our relatives are not resources in that extractive sense, right? I don't go up to my brother and be like, hey, you're a resource that I can use renewably. That's weird. It doesn't make sense at all. So as a storyteller, I believe that the way we talk and communicate and frame these issues that we collectively face is important. Words and terms can either alienate or connect us. The language we use matters because we carry these words, these stories, and language within us, right? In our bodies, in our minds. We embody them and we share them with others. We pass them down. This is what I recommend we consider to reframe and shift our approach to issues of water and food systems. So before I hand the mic over to Consuelo to help facilitate the panel discussion, I just want to remind everyone of why we're here. This is the title of the session, Nourishing Our Future, Sustaining Local Food and Water Connections. And again, we're here to reframe and envision a future where water and food systems thrive harmoniously, cultivating sustainability, equity, and resilience for future generations. So I'm going to invite Consuelo and Catherine and Dr. Stan up here on the stage with me to hear about their expert opinions.
All right, well, thank you for inviting me to moderate the panel. How are you all doing? Good? Great. So yes, my name is Consuelo Martinez with the San Diego Food System Alliance, and I'm really excited to be part of this panel and to hear from our speakers today. Water is very important, and I'll just say that I was sharing with my partner today, who I met, having also serving on the San Diego County Water Authority, that everything, I'll never look at water the same again. It's something that I will always cherish now more than ever. So really grateful for this panel. So for our speakers, how would you describe your kinship with food, land, and water?
Hello. Can you hear me all right? Thank you so much I just want to say thank you so much for having me here and calling me an expert. I'm humbled. I see a lot of other farmer faces out in the audience, and I would say they also have a deep connection with water and the land and their food. And so thank you for allowing me to represent your voices too. Water brought me into food. It was through my connection to becoming aware of what's happening in our local waterways, from being up in Escondido Creek, actually doing water sampling with coastkeeper, meant like 12 years ago, and seeing algae blooms and dead fish everywhere, being like, why is everything dead? Water is supposed to be alive and provide nourishment, and it's the opposite. And you look up on the hillside and see, decomposed granite with avocados that, they're trying to flush the salts out of the water to nourish the trees to grow avos, and then we're killing something else in exchange. And that's when it really hit, like, hey, our food is important, and it's this connection. And I think the more that I start looking around me to see how am I interacting with my local water, just literally the creeks nearby, the frozen pond in my backyard, traveling and seeing folks bathing and getting their drinking water from the same resource, and contextualizing with what's happening here in San Diego. And like you were saying, it's somewhere else. It's not, it is here. It is here, and these issues are facing us. And how much do we connect with water in our day-to-day life? And I think we do it all the time. And every watermelon that we eat, right? Food is full of water and sustenance, and that vibration that food carries and that we nourish our bodies with impacts how we can exist and feel better within our own lives. What are we putting in? And so finding that thread of water in our local environment, but then also internally as we consume it, and asking ourselves, have we given the time of day to really think of water as something more than, thank you for framing it as a resource, as as our relatives. I think that was a good way of saying that.
Hello, everybody. For myself, from the San Isabel Band of the Ipai Nation, I have seen we've had water sources dry up. A lot of it's going into Lake Henshaw. We see death taking place. And I remember when I was younger, I would ask the elders, or I would listen to them talk. And some of them would say, that those kind of trees don't belong there. They belong where there's more water. These other kind of trees would fit there. They knew that. And a lot of people, when they think of the natives in Southern California, I've heard of hunter-gatherers, and that's so far from the truth. We practice a form of agriculture, horticulture, where each clan had control or worked with a certain area, planting and helping to take care of oak trees. And from there we would gather acorns, which is one of our staples. Also pinyon, torii pine, number of different things. And what we didn't have in our area, we would bring back and plant in our areas. So we did have a form of agriculture, and this relied on water. And our riparian areas, which held the water. When you were talking about all that water going down, there's a reason why it's a mess. That used to be a blessing. Now you don't want to go in there, for 72 hours into the ocean. And a lot of that happened because people wanted to change the landscape rather than honoring what was there, the wetlands, and what it does. And I'm preaching to the choir because you need to have a riparian area in order to recharge the land, the water table. What happens when you don't? What happens when you drain it in order to have more land for farming, more land for housing? You're creating an ecological disaster. And that water, that runoff, it has no place to stop. That's water that we needed. That's going straight into the ocean. It's taking the contaminants, but it's also part of climate change. It's also what's happening. People, when they did these things, it's like they're playing a game of checkers. With our people, it was a game of chess. We would take a look, 5 moves in front. If we do this, what could be the impact? And a lot of our knowledge has come from over thousands and thousands of years. Our people are no strangers to climate change. We have village sites under the Pacific Ocean. We have fish trap sites where there's just desert right now in the Imperial County. It's in our songs, it's in our stories, and it's in our narrative. That native knowledge or organic science, the native epistemology, is important not just to hear, but what can be done, because this is speaking to a historical chronicle of what has taken place in the area. And I think that's very important, along with our land practices. You know, how many of you have been here when in 2003? How many of you? What happened in 2003? The Cedar Fire. It burned over 1,000 homes. It started in the Laguna Mountains and just ran all the way down into, into San Diego proper, Rancho Bernardo, Rancho Penasquitos. And then in 2007, what happened? The Witch Creek Fire. All of this is due to poor land practices. And we, as Native people, we were forbidden from practicing these, ways of tending the land. And this is this is the impact of what has happened. So these are some of the things that I would say. And, land, water, all of these are interconnected. You cannot have a healthy ecosystem without all of these being in balance. So these are the things that we have inherited. What are we going to do now?
Thank you. As for myself, personally and professionally, I grew up here in San Diego, but I'm not from this area. I'm from the Philippines. So I guess my role in kinship with water and food and land is a little different. I'm here to learn from the people who come from here, who spent millennia here. I'm here as a storyteller to listen and learn and engage. And I know that even though I'm not from here, I'm here now. And I have a personal responsibility to learn as much as I can about why things are the way that they are, and to question them and to think critically, like Dr. Stan said this morning. We all have knowledge, right? And knowledge is power, and how we use that knowledge is important. Because we are creating our today, our future. So that's how I kind of see my role in the food and water and land space, as learning, telling stories, listening, and sharing what I know. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. What are our biggest challenges surrounding connections between food, land, and water?
The first thing that comes to my mind as a farmer, and full disclosure, I am a flower farmer now, but I was a veggie farmer for many years and still grow medicine for food. But the water quality comes to mind. So as a grower, what water is accessible? I grew up in Chicago area, and it just fell from the sky. It was perfect pH, no salts. And here in San Diego, we have this very complicated distribution system to bring water to the plants. And we have to navigate a climate that wants the water, to evaporate. And so creating an environment for our plants that can keep the water at the roots of the plants. And so soil is so key to that. I see my compost friend over here and working to create sponges in the soil so that we can create its own little micro ecosystem on our farms. Because our water quality that we have in San Diego is so saltier, it's getting even saltier. And the reality of trying to grow food in years to come. There's this like rosy colored glasses that say, oh, we have water, it just comes from the pipe, and isn't this wonderful? And water districts are doing their darndest to make sure that we have water security. However, that's very salty water. It's gonna get more and more expensive, and we need water to grow food. And the things that we can do on a farm to help like balance that includes taking care of our soil, creating native habitat on our farms and around our farms, and making sure that the nutrients that our plants need is available in the soil and not being applied in a way that's going to harm. So we have water coming onto our farm and water leaving our farm. And so thinking of how the water leaves our farm is just as important as what water can we grow with. We need to think of our nutrients running off, our pesticides running off. Are we causing harm downstream? And are we being responsible with our water usage? And those are like skilled questions that, we learn with over time, and we have to learn from each other and be able to share skills and knowledge so that we can learn as farmers. How do we keep water in the soil? What are plants that are responsible to grow? Oh, and this is my opportunity to shout out the seed farmer training. So what seeds can we cultivate to be resilient for our San Diego climate? There's a seed farmer training happening next year. So if you're interested and you have access to land, do the seed farmer training. And so, we need to knowledge share with one another so that we can become resilient to fight what's going to happen, the inevitable future that is unknown, but the known part that we can control is how we communicate and share with each other.
Thank you.
For myself, I'm going to what our people do. Sounds like all of you go walking around outside, right? What do you see out there? Land, well, you see all that, but as you get farther east, land, trees, shrubs, all these things. And that's what people say, things. Plant, scrub, brush, weeds. But for our people, it's a pharmacy out there. It's a grocery store out there. It's a hardware store out there. Everything that we need in order to thrive is out there. How many of you have ever eaten acorns? How many of you have ever gone harvesting? What's the time? Right now, yes. How about pinion nuts? Torrey pine nuts, chia, all these different grasses, all these different things that we have out there. Very nutritious. And those plants, those trees, they're acclimated to this area. When the Spaniards came, they tried to use European farming practices here and it didn't work. People were starving to death because they wanted to change the landscape. And then, again, I'm going back to the riparian areas. When they drained those, it set about. I always call it an ecological disaster, an environmental desert. I mean, as far as native plants. And these are plants that they take care of us. And I'll just say something. I mean, I've heard people say, well, you know what, we have our own foods now, that's different. These are things in the past. We still harvest acorns. We harvested acorns last month. We still practice these things. And you were talking about medicine. I just wanted to share something. How many of you ever gone to the doctor? Okay, just checking. Some people are diehards. I don't want to do it, But in 2007, I had to go to the doctor, and I got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I remember the doctor said there's no stage 5. This was in 2007. he gave me 3 months to live. And he said even with chemo and radiation, at best a 25% chance of living 1 year. Well, this Indian doctor, 3 of them, that do plant medicines, they gave me these teas, and they said you use this for about a week, and this will get that sickness weakened, but it's going to start to get a resistance to that, but it's still weak. Then you use this other, and it will kill it. And I did. And 10 years later, that same oncologist looked at me and said, I don't even know why you're still alive. And I looked at him and I said, because you're just practicing medicine. And this is part of our native knowledge, and it's not just with the Kunyas, but throughout the world, that it's important to be able to keep an environment, have an environment where those plants, those trees, that environment survives and thrives, because it can teach us, it can help us. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you. In my work that I do, I mentioned that I'm a storyteller, and that I'm learning and changing every day in this space. I would say the biggest challenge is that we can't erase, recent history. We can't erase the millennia and the histories that we've had, both modern and indigenous. But we can figure out a way to move forward together. That's the biggest challenge that I see, is how do we reconcile our past with our current state of affairs and move through it together into the future. Like I said, this is just the first of many conversations that I hope to have with you all. It's really difficult, I think, to reconcile how we were taught things growing up and to discover that things are actually a different way, or they were a different way before we learned them, and to go through that process of learning and unlearning and learning and unlearning that cycle. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges and difficulties. And it's also just trying to explain how big the problem is to people, because we are bombarded by news and other things that are going on in the world around us, to get people to care enough about what's happening at our feet, right? To our neighbors, to our communities. I think that's one of my biggest challenges.
Thank you. Listen, go ahead and keep that microphone, because I'm going to start with you next. I'm kind of changing the order, mixing it up here. And by the way, you will have an opportunity to ask questions, so start thinking about those, because we're almost at that time. So, Alyssa, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Dr. Stan. How does your work attempt to reframe the broader narrative of how we approach issues affecting food, land, and water? And a second part to that question, how can we change how we speak about it?
This is good, because I kind of just talked about this.
Yes.
So I think the reframing and the changing happens first by listening and sharing. I'm a sponge today. I'm learning from all of you, even though I'm up here talking. I'm listening and learning and trying to figure out how to find a way forward. And in our work, the policy world, it's difficult to get people to change, right? It's extremely difficult to get these big bureaucracies and government agencies to see things a different way. And it's hard work. But I think listening and connecting and empathizing is the first step. And sharing, of course. Using your voice, speaking up. I think that's what I try to do in my work as a storyteller. Yeah, I think, I mean, even in the day-to-day, it's difficult to see how big the problem is, right? We try to like tackle our to-do list and just get through the day and, you know, be done with it, but you still have this bigger, larger issue looming over all of us. So I think acknowledging both the small things that we can do at the micro level and the larger things that we can do at the policy or the federal or the state level, even the regional level, I think is an important part of reframing and rethinking and reimagining our futures together. Because it's whatever we're doing right now is not working, right? That's why we're here today, because we all want change. We all see it, we all feel it, that something needs to happen, something needs to give. So I would just encourage you all to think about the role that you play in food and water systems, and think about the small and the little things that you can do, but also acknowledge that you're not the problem, right? We're not the problem. Taking a shorter shower is important, but it's like not gonna fix the larger issue, right? We need policy and governments, and we need money and resources to address these larger issues. So yeah, I would just encourage you all to not be discouraged and to, you know, try and reframe the way that you're having these conversations in your day to day.
As the president of Quinnipiac Community College, one of the things that we work on developing is a pedagogic system that teaches the honoring of organic scholars and the science that comes with it. How many of you ever been to Mexico? Anybody? Okay, just checking. You know, how many of you ever been to Baja or Sonora? Below Mexicali? How many of you ever seen the Rio Hardy? It's a mess. And all that came down from the north, coming down, runoff. Well, I mean, I've seen washing machines of water from there cleaner than that. I've been to the Colorado River in Sonora. There's no more river. The Cocoa Pot people took me over there, and they said it's all gone. If you're my neighbor and I'm above you, I'm not going to pee in the water that's going to go to you. That's being disrespectful. We need to learn how to share. We need to learn how to take care of each other. Sure, I could make more money if I do this, but when is it enough? We need to balance that with taking care of each other. And that's an easy thing to say, but you have people out there who are, no, I need to make more money, I can do this, I can do that, I can develop this. And it turns into a complete mess. So this is one of the things that I would say is that we need to learn how to take care of each other and work together and be good neighbors. Be good neighbors. Last thing I'll say before I shut my snoot on this is that traditionally, when we gathered acorns or when we gathered other different food sources, we did not take everything. We took what we needed to store, and we left the rest for our relatives, the animals, so that they could eat. How many of you ever gone hunting? One person. Okay, me too. I do that too. How many deer are out there now? There's very few. There's a reason why. Because we're not taking care of each other. So this is the thing that I would pull out. We need to learn how to share and balance it and manage it. How many of you like chocolate cake? Okay. Are you going to eat that whole cake at once? Maybe. I mean, you need a gallon of milk. or a piece at a time and share. Eventually you will have a whole cake, but you don't have to have it all that day.
I feel like my old hat was working for the water board, and we valued water based on the 1972 Clean Water Act and setting up numerical standards and numbers. And sure, we cleaned up getting sewage going into our creeks and rivers. But when we reduce the value of something so essential in our life to a number, a numerical number, we lose a lot of context. And I know there was work happening for biological indicators to start looking how healthy So there's a creek right here outside of the center. And as I was walking in, pausing to look at that creek, and I encourage you all to do the same as you head back out to the parking lot. That's a creek, that's a living ecosystem, and that's been reduced to a concrete channel and numbers. And the lack of trees and interconnectedness that we have with our waterways here, and just run the water out straight. You know, we're missing big pieces of the story. And we need to value our water resources as something that's a part of us, that we see and acknowledge every day, and that we give gratitude for. And it can happen on these big policy levels, and when we speak just a language of numbers, and it is very challenging to get everybody on the table, because we are having different conversations about what does water mean to us. I need it to grow these crops over here. I need it to water my beautiful landscape over there. We need water to drink and cook our food with. We have all these needs and demands on our water supply. And there is this other conversation that can hold space for it all, and bring it into the worthiness of ourselves and our ability to affect change in these bigger worlds that we don't necessarily know how to navigate. There are advocates that are speaking on our behalf, the National Young Farmer Coalition, San Diego Coastkeeper. There are these voices that can help represent us, and so connecting ourselves with these organizations so that your voice is heard. You can sign on to letters to help support legislation that's happening, that can promote the values that you feel are important. And giving ourselves that agency back, that we are worthy people. Our voices matter. And yes, shorter shower, is part of it, right? So we can take a shorter shower and check a box. Oh, okay, cool, yep, I'm doing my part to conserve water. Or we can take a shower and imagine that water traveling from up in Colorado, falling, getting used up in Denver, and putting back in the river, and coming back and recycling. And we can give thanks and gratitude for this water that is cleansing us, and using that as an opportunity to connect with this resource. There are so many opportunities to see water around us and to find that connection, and we don't need to know where it's going to lead us, but we can be open to hearing what stories are coming through that water. We can learn to quiet ourselves, to actually listen to the parts of us that do have agency. And it may not look like marching or standing in a room at the water board to promote a certain regulation. It can be as simple as being kind to your neighbor, learning to speak with kindness to one another, because when we have this little ecosystem within our communities and our culture, and we start caring about one another a little bit more, it has a ripple effect that we have no idea how far that's gonna reach. Imagine you just throwing that little pebble in the lake. Where are those ripples gonna go? How far can they reach by the simplest of actions?
Thank you. Let's give our panel a round of applause. So I will before we leave today, make sure that the panel has a closing statements, so I will allow time for that. But we do have time, 10 minutes for questions. So I wanted to open it up to our participants here and see what questions you have for our panelists. I know you've been thinking about them, so yes, right here. And if you don't mind saying your name and then asking your question, that would be great.
My question is, how do you all think us being a tri-nation, so the USA, Mexico, and the tribal nations of the region, influences that connection between land, water, and food? And I know Dr. Stan alluded to this, but also as an equity issue. So that was my question.
You all know that San Diego is home to more reservations than any other county in the country. There's 18 reservations here in San Diego. Y en otro lado, en Baja, tenemos 6 reservas indígenas, Kumiai, 2 Paipai, un Quiliba, un Cocopa, y un Cochimí. So there's a lot of diversity going on. With that, to deal with this issue, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a reciprocal process. You know, we talk about what's going on with the Colorado River going into Mexico, into the Sea of Cortez, the new river coming across into the United States, and and it's going into the Salton Sea. People talking about, you know, the water contamination and practices that affect the indigenous nations on both sides of the border. Whether or not it's Presidente Liquor that's, you know, just taking all the water in order for the Valle Guadalupe, you know, Ruta de Vino, you know, so that the vineyards can have enough water, but the people are having to dig wells deeper and deeper. Or up here with San Isabel, where our wells are surging because most of the water is going into Lake Henshaw. We all need to sit down and talk about how we can all support each other. If one group is lacking the infrastructure, then you know what, it affects all of us. What can we do to help that group, and vice versa? In the end, we really do, we need to be good neighbors, because traditionally, if you had a problem, your house was leaking, I'm your neighbor, I'm gonna come help you. If something happened to mine, you would come help me. That's just how we do things, because it'll affect all of us. So that's one of the things that I see. And that border, well, I have opinions about that. But anyway, you know, that wall that's there is not stopping anything. It's just a speed bump. But when we talk about security, security needs to be not just us, but our neighbors too. So.
Thank you. Well, we have a question here.
Hello. I have some acreage right next to the Campo Reservation, and I always go out every day, and I'm always finding plants that I would like to know what it is, and I have a plant app that I can take a picture of it, and you know. But I've looked and looked and looked for sources that can tell me what are the native plants here, what can they be used for, and sometimes I can identify what the name is, but they don't say what the medical use is or the food use is, or, I mean, that's the difficulty. I've had tons of books, but they're more like the whole Western region, or I don't have the ones that, I'm always finding plants that I don't know what the information is, and where can I find that?
I am so glad you brought that up. How many of you have that same problem at times? Well, guess what? We have a thing called Kumeyaay Community College that you can come take classes in ethnobotany and ethnoecology where we talk about those plants. We actually go out and show you and do these things. So if you want to come learn, and it's open to both Kumeyaay and non-Kumeyaay. So you're more than welcome to come.
I just wanted to speak to the border relationships with the tri-nations, and because I see, you know, a good friend Ramon over here and lives in Imperial Beach. Yeah, and I just wanted to bring light towards the Tijuana River and the politics that are happening at that border, and the water quality and the sedimentation issues, and how when there is a common shared crisis happening, bringing people to the table and allowing that tension to breed creativity and spark innovation and really hard work by some really amazing individuals. Four Walls comes to mind, Stephen comes to mind, and dedicating our lives towards finding innovative solutions and just piecemealing what can happen in one community and what can somebody else do in their space. And so, you know, it's complex. I don't know all the details, but I wanted to just draw that issue to your awareness. And maybe Ramon, you want to speak.
Yeah, you know, my comment is really just going to build on where you're leaving off here, because I grew up right next to the watershed. I played in that river valley when I was a kid, and then I got to farm there, you know, 25 years later at Wild Willow Farm. I had been surfing in IB for about 5 years up until it got really bad. And I also, as a kid, watched my father cross that border, you know, to go visit my grandmother. He would literally cross that, you know, that watershed or that river valley illegally to go visit to come back after his visits to visit his mother. And he told me stories about all the creeks in Tijuana, you know, that would empty out before they built that huge channel, and how beautiful it was there. And recently I got to get through the estuary center right there, I got to go through a training where they gave us just a high-level glimpse of everything happening in that watershed on both sides of the border. And that tension that you're talking about, I am sitting with that tension right now. Like, I cannot get that watershed out of my thoughts, you know, out of my heart, because it's so incredibly complex that it almost feels like we're gonna lose parts of that watershed, maybe even the estuary, right? Especially with all the sediment coming in and kind of asphyxiating the wetland and kind of incapacitating its ability to do what it does, right? To filter so much. And so really my comment is more about that creativity, that tension, and that how you go into a situation like that, because of all the watersheds in San Diego County, that's the one that's got the most daunting, you know, future, I would say, right? I don't know that we're gonna solve that, because Tijuana is this city, this very young city with not the best infrastructure, that's dying out, and they keep developing. And all these factories and, you know, what do they call them in Espanol? Las maquiladoras, you know, they're impacting the watershed as well and the water quality. And so I don't know what to do other than to storytell and to tell the story, right? And I love what Four Walls is doing, but I think that watershed in particular is a good example of what's happening kind of all over the world, where borders cross, you know, our relatives, right? Watersheds and rivers. And so I'm in that place where I really don't know what to do, and the only thing that occurs to me is to tell that story. So. Any comments on that?
Well, you know, I do have some hands on the back, and we're almost out of time. So let me go to the back here. Jordan, if you don't mind, we'll take one more question.
Hi, my name is Adam McCurdy, and I'm with Coastal Roots Farm, and obviously a lot to unpack here, and policy and infrastructure and all of that. So in the spirit of two things that were mentioned that Catherine and Dr. Stan mentioned, in the current day, as far as minimizing usage and minimizing our runoff, do you know the current policy of water catchment or water diversion and reuse? Or if you don't have a short answer to that, are there good resources to our current legality issues in San Diego County for just diversion and catchment? So I guess that would go to minimizing usage, because we're reusing just kind of in our own closed loop system, not going purple pipe or anything. And then catching when if we do have El Nino, catching that or catching our own runoff and reusing it.
And this is on like residential properties?
I'm speaking more for farm usage.
Mm-hmm.
We can go residential too, because I know farm usage comes into food safety, and we get more fun things to unpack.
Yeah. To my knowledge, and Consuelo, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think here in San Diego we have those restrictions on how much water that we can catch that falls off of our property. I know in places, other places outside of San Diego and other states, they restrict that, which is a shame. But here in San Diego, even at the county level, you can, as a resident, you can get rain barrels on your property. You can also divert water that is like gray water, essentially, so coming from your sinks or your showers or your laundry, and you can divert that to your properties and your landscapes. There are organizations that help you do that. So I know that at the county level there are rebates that help you do that. They help convert your lawns. They help you buy rain barrels to like size your property as well, and they give what are those called, rebates for them. And then I know that there's an organization called Catching H2O. They also help you do that if those projects are pretty daunting to you. So I believe that there are ways to reuse the water that's coming off of your property. Maybe Catherine, you have some insight as to like the farmer perspective of that?
Well, you know this catchment, but in the soil, raise the organic matter in the soil. And, but I hear your, liquid water that's moving. And, I don't know, it may be, Dr. Rodriguez, you know more about like when the Europeans came and built all the little dams and reservoirs that you see like totally dried up as you head out further east. And so, that's one approach, but otherwise collecting rainwater, as a way to dilute salty water and to mix it in. The amount of storage capacity that's needed, though, to capture this water, you're up in Encinitas, it might be interesting to see Fox Point Farms, who built a giant reservoir underneath this new development that's going to be collecting water and then be ideally reused for their irrigation systems. So there's massive scale, those kind of things happening, and then a smaller scale, 5,000, 10,000 gallon tanks that can hold rainwater, and at least you'd have rainwater for your compost teas and different applications where you'd want fresh, clean rainwater.
Hi, I'm Craig Kalaji. I'm the Sustainability Manager for San Pasqual Valley Soils, just here in Escondido next to Safari Park. I'm also on the Education Committee for the Compost Research and Education Foundation for the U.S. Composting Council for the United States. And Alyssa, Coast Keepers were part of a grant almost 10 years ago that produced a document called the Sustainable Landscape Guidelines for San Diego. And in there, and I really appreciate Catherine bringing up compost, because compost is the energy that connects water quality with the food waste and landscape waste. That carbon in that compost is what feeds the biology in the soil, which creates the soil health that Catherine was talking about. And that publication is free of charge. You go to the county, just go to the County of San Diego's website and type in Sustainable Landscape Guidelines, a watershed approach toward landscaping, and they have a whole section on the use of recycled organics to clean water and to absorb and capture that water. They do a beautiful job in there, but also the Compost Research and Education Foundation published well over 10 years ago a publication called the Soil Water Connection. The Soil Water Connection is a small publication with all the research on how to utilize compost. It's called the Watershed Manager's Guide to Organics. It's like $10, I think, for this little copy. But in there, we'll give you all the resources you need to manage stormwater and start to filter some of those contaminants, break down those hydrocarbons in there. A lot of people don't realize the soil biology actually consumes hydrocarbons as a food source. That's where we go when we spill oil into our oceans, to clean that up, to remediate it. Organics really is an underutilized, because we're not teaching it. The last call we had with the Education Committee was Cornell University. Professor there was on the phone, she said, or on the call, and she said, the students are demanding education on how to manage our organics in the environment to clean this planet up, and we have no classes for them. We need more teachers, and we need more practitioners to start teaching what we already know that's out there, but it's not getting distributed. Our engineers are coming from a chemical engineering or structural engineering background. They're not coming from a biological engineering background. So I ask everybody to go to the Coast Keepers was part of that grant. Thank you very much. We were also participating in it as the Association of Compost Producers. That is a real critical key. If you want to take action and start to solve this, we can use it in our native lands for stormwater restoration projects, stream bank restoration. We did a huge project in Temecula where we literally revegetated the stream bank and got plants, native plants, growing back in that environment. So I just highly encourage you all to start looking at these resources that are out there and demanding that people start to teach this information.
So real quick, because we have to close this session out, stay after. So we do have a resources page, San Diego Food System Alliance. Every session here also you'll have access to slides and bios, so we'll follow up with you on that. But I do want to close this out. So 10-second close out, then we'll give an applause before we go to lunch, and stay if you want to connect with our speakers. So go ahead, Dr. Stan, 10 seconds, how you want to close this out.
I just wanted to say that when we can blend both academic with native organic science, you were talking about compost, I'm talking about fire science in order to create charcoal, so it also helps to detoxify the environment. All of those are very important, and when we work together, we're all stronger together.
Stay curious, and you are worthy. You're good people. Thanks for coming.
Go to our website and sign up for our email list, sdcoastkeeper.org. I'll put the resources, or it's up there on the board, and I'll put those resources up there as well. Thank you.